Thank you, Madam Chairs Gadkar Wilcox and Reps Dathan and the distinguished members of the Government Oversight Committee. My name is State Rep Ann Hughes of the 135th House District, and I really want to thank you for bringing House Bill 7186 as a committee bill before you, a report concerning the use of body scanners and machines and strip cavity searches, because I really think this committee is the right place for a review of systemic oversight of our government sanctioned policies. And the background is Public Act 2312 tasks the DOC with reviewing the use of body scanners as an alternative means to strip searches where possible and identifying where they would be most effective in reducing strip searches. That was passed in 2023. We have yet to really see a significant change in this policy. And I find that as a problem as, a legislator. When I review the current policy, I find it is really outdated. It is not trauma informed. Strip search makes a very big distinction between strip search and cavity search, as if a strip search to stand naked for a systemic visual inspection of an unclothed inmate's hair, body, cavities, nose, underarms, soles of feet, under breast, between toes, rectum, and genitalia is not humiliating and abusive, and it is. It is humiliating, abusive, and degrading, and it is a normalized and frequent practice. And I really want to ask this committee why we are continuing to use not trauma-informed systemic practice when there is a non-abusive technology solution that is better and not traumatizing to use. And if there's a question of cost alone, I want to address that as well. But the reason I use abuse and trauma-informed is because abuse is centered on power and control. And any domestic violence survivor knows, any child abuse survivor knows, any sexual assault victim survivor knows, and any domestic violence survivor knows that abuse is about power and control, not necessarily about physical contact or physical harm. And in other committees, we are updating our policies around PTSI injury to include first responders and portal-to-portal dispatchers in seeing things besides a bodily limb injury to qualify for PTSI. And I would submit that we are further harming both our workforce and our already traumatized, incarcerated, and many with mental health issues by doing these casual abusive practices when there are better non-invasive, non-abusive technology available. I think it's really important to understand that when you have a traumatized individual that you are degrading and humiliating. By the way, the policies do not say anything about verbal degradation during these commands and during this practice. It does say that it's supposed to be videotaped if there's any resistance or combative, which is further traumatizing again to all of those survivors of trauma that I spoke about. The natural trauma response to that type of abuse is aggression or self-defense or combative or non-compliance. That is a natural trauma response. And yet, when inmates can't help themselves and do that, it invites excessive force. And this state is already paying out tens of millions of dollars just last week in in claims brought by families of incarcerated members whose family member died at the hands of excessive force of our corrections. And nobody is held accountable because it is systematized. It is systematized. That is, so the taxpayers essentially pay out tens of millions of dollars of claims for these suits, which are going to continue because the cycle of escalation of excessive force continues, because this is an abusive practice. So we have, asked for a review. We finally got a letter, which I think you have before you, dated January 30th, 2024. We have a Falcon report that has a bunch of recommendations. And the bottom line is that they recommend the purchase and use of 26 of these body scanners throughout our facilities, and they've numbered how many in each, to the cost of $4 million. It would require some training of how to use it and so forth, but it does conclude that it would reduce 250,000 strip searches in the course of 1 year. 250,000 strip searches. Keep in mind, we have about between 10,000 and 11,000 detainees under our custody. And I don't know why we don't do that, because we are continuing to pay out tremendous claims, rightfully so. And this would greatly reduce this abusive practice. So I am so grateful to you for raising this bill, and I hope you hear this testimony on why this is an outdated, not trauma-informed, and actually harms both the workforce and the detainees in custody.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Representative Hughes. Are there questions? Oh, there's a question from Representative Cocker first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Hughes, for bringing this forward. In fairness, I will say I do know a party or an individual personal to me who has suffered through some of this. Can you further elaborate on how this sort of activity may contribute to them having a negative experience in our correctional institutions that may lead to furthering behavioral issues?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Representative. The settlement case that you're referring to was an individual with severe mental health issues, and the non-compliance of a strip search can immediately lead to escalation and use of excessive force, or in that case, close, in violation of their own procedures, but close use of pepper spray and refusing to decontaminate and follow procedure, basically. But a trauma response is combativeness, is self-defense, is non-compliance, which is listed here as a reason to go further, and a reason to further restrict and in fact a reason to go ahead and use what they call a constrained strip search. And it is very violating, very humiliating, very traumatizing, and it results in the person being, hogtied, 4-point restraint, in-cell restraint, and pepper sprayed at close, all kinds of horrible things that, like I say, it harms and in some cases kills the detainee, but it also takes a toll, a mental health toll on the enforcers. And that's why I refer to the PTSI of first responders that we're dealing with in labor committee, because there is tremendous PTSI in the case of these corrections officers that witness, that have a hand in that, and that is why they all know to a person the timeline till they get to retire with a full pension. That's why there's a much higher rate of suicide and a much higher rate and a much lower life expectancy for these folks too. It takes a toll. It is not about safety and security, because it really is harmful to both workforce and the detainees. It's a trauma response.
And I want to thank you for bringing this forward and testifying on this. And I'm in much agreement with what you have stated. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to ask my question in traffic.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Hughes. Are there any other questions? Thank you for bringing this to our attention. Oh, Representative.
Thank you so much. And thank you for bringing this to our attention. I really was not made fully aware of this issue because I don't sit on judiciary. But I was going through some of the appendices of the January report that you were talking about. One was the cost of the said machine. Is this what they kind of have like at airports and other sort of facilities? Are there special type of scanners that are done that are recommended, and
This
are other
is-
states using these
Yeah,
sort of equipment?
the one that is recommended that the appendices refers to is being used in other correctional facilities. So I think there is a higher sensitivity to what would be considered contraband than the airport scanners. It's also low, I don't know if you call it low radiation to support and protect the workforce from exposure and also, yeah, so it's very specific in here. And that's why I think that they might have been quoting 2023 costs of 153 or 158,000 a unit.
Okay. So in terms of the numbers per facility, I was a bit sort of surprised at the numbers, particularly if, we have a declining inmate population, why so many might be needed. And if you were to prioritize, it is 155 $160,000 per machine, all in. Would you prioritize any institutions that they had listed out in I think it's the Appendix 3,
Yeah, I see that.
where they
Again,
said 26?
I see 26. I see that they have 3 in Garner, 2 in most of the others, but Bridgeport 1, York 2. Again, keep in mind that some of like New Haven Correctional and Bridgeport are often pre-sentencing. They're just being held there. So, and unfortunately, as you've seen, a lot of times people with severe mental health issues, behavioral health issues end up in these in these facilities and can't afford bail, whatever. So they're being held there. So, it's hard for me to say they don't require one because that might be exactly where it would be best used is where people are, temporarily being held while we sort through which system they're going to go to ultimately, but yeah, I mean, start with any number of them. We passed this in 2023 and start reducing this highly traumatizing, highly abusive. And that's why I call it strip abuse, because they're acting like according to the policies that you have before you, that this is not abusive, but it's not trauma informed either. And you're going to hear testimony today from people who will not be transferred or be, who will not show up at their hearing and so forth, or have visits towards the end of their to the end of their sentence because it is so traumatizing. They can't survive it. They can't go through it. There's panic attacks. There's all kinds of triggers. They know they're going to be combative, and that's going to extend their time. So that's why it is really abusive practice.
Okay. In terms of your research for other states, I think you mentioned, other states do utilize these. in terms of, are they widely used, and are strip searches widely used in other states where machines like these don't have it
Well,
seems like
well, that's
from what
partly
I'm
what the,
hearing, it's every time that you have a in-person visit
that's right.
with an incarcerated individual, that incarcerated individual has to then have a um, a strip search. And my feeling, how you were describing them, it doesn't sound like it's a quick process. Sounds long. Where these machines, if it's similar to like an airport scanner, would be relatively quick
Quick.
and reduce the amount of
Exactly.
time as
They say
well.
they can do, I don't know, 185 an hour or something like
Yeah.
that. So they can't do that many searches an hour, individually. The Falcon report does refer more to how that's implemented in other states than I have off the top of my head. But
You submitted those as part of your testimony?
yes,
Okay,
yeah.
great. So we can
Mhm.
refer to those online. In terms of one of the aspects of the bill is the number of strip searches and cavity searches of persons who are incarcerated. Are you aware if DOC lists that anywhere as part of their metrics that
What's
they?
interesting is that they say in their report in 2024 that there was no authorized cavity searches, but the interesting thing about so that means that there has to be medical personnel present for an authorized search. We don't know how many unauthorized searches there were. In fact, strip searches by its own policy is not, if it's a regular strip search, and not necessarily reasonable suspicion, or they're in a segregated area or whatever, they don't write any report. So their estimation of how many that have occurred is because of the incidence of transfer, or the incidence of visitors. They know how many visitors there are. They know they do it every time there's a visitor, but they don't write any report. So we have no oversight. And this is what I'm getting at, why it's so important that your committee is taking this on. We have no oversight of, you know, anybody could be saying anything to those inmates that they crude, and you will hear testimony of what they do say to people, and lewd and crude and you know, abusive comments. There is no metric of how many people are witnessing it, of corrections. It could be a whole gang of corrections officers. The only time is that you're supposed to write a report if it's cross-gender. And again, that doesn't feel to me like that's very trauma informed, as if a person of the same gender wouldn't be making demeaning, humiliating, and abusive comments. Or being amused by it, any of those kinds of things. And the other thing I will say is that this practice, in doing my research, comes directly from the slave trade and the horse trade. The slave trade and the horse trade. Why? Because potential buyers are inspecting their property, and these inmates are considered property. They're not used by the first names. And so this is a practice straight out of the slave trade and the horse trade.
And how are those handled?
Yeah, you're going to hear a lot about that today. There is one particularly egregious lawsuit, again, that as a result of strip searches, the detainee escalated and was killed by excessive force, by officers kicking him in the face and beating him. And again, this is on camera in the security systems. And these lawsuits must be defended by our attorney general, because it is our state sanctioned services that are doing this. And we are already paying out this year alone, tens of millions of dollars for settling those claims. Again, there's no civil or criminal liability, and those are going to continue. In fact, I think we are just a big, huge, fat class action lawsuit waiting to happen that is going to cost the taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars because we know that this is going on our watch and we're not doing anything about it.
Okay, thank you so much. That's all for me.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair.
Thank you, Representative Hughes. I want to note that I was at that Judiciary Committee hearing that you, I think, are referencing, and I was alarmed that not only did it result in death, but it resulted in significant liability for the state. And so I think you make an important point about measures that can be taken also to de-escalate situations. So trauma-informed practices will help ensure that, like, that knee-jerk response, right? It does not escalate a situation, which then results in further injury and then significant liability. Not to mention of course the importance of thinking about when there's an alternative technology that preserves dignity in that way and reduces harm. That's what we should be looking into. So I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you. I will just say that, that trauma-informed response, I think about my own mother who had dementia, but she fell during COVID and had a hip replacement. And the physical therapist, again, this is under our, medical care, say to her, march, lift up your leg, do this. Now she had early dementia. She couldn't comply. So what happened? She became combative. So they strapped her and confined her into a wheelchair. So that is just a natural human instinct that is through frustration and despair and trauma. And keep in mind, it's about power and control, really, more than safety. And we think about through the spectrum of our facilities, how that is so often the response. And I think we need to try a different way.
Thank you, Representative Hughes.